So hello everybody, welcome to our session, our Coffee Break with Researchers session. We are going to talk today about the regional development and innovation, and I am going to start sharing the screen. I don't know if we have already attendees, people to our session, so I guess we will start. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Are you all seeing me, Ski? I hope so.
Yeah, we see your presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. So welcome again. Our session is hosted by Coffee Break with Researchers, and we are going to talk about urban and regional development through cultural tourism, and particularly about the project Smart Cool Tour, which is a Horizon 2020 project. First, a little bit about us. Why Coffee Break with Researchers? We are a platform that makes scientific knowledge accessible to all, funded by Marcus Grillage. He's the director of Circle at Union University, and I am the head of communication and presenter. So what is our idea of Coffee Breaks is bridging the gap between research and society, is closing this gap. We produce high-quality short videos with a researcher about scientific findings over a cup of coffee. And researchers explain the idea of the project, the findings, practical implications, and personal motivations. And our session today is about urban and regional development through cultural tourism. And this project is Smart Culture from Horizon 2020. So I'm going to show you, just to go straight to our speakers, a little bit of our videos. Welcome to Coffee Break with Researchers. Today, I'm having a coffee break with Dora Almazo. She is a postdoctoral researcher at the Environmental Sciences and Policy Department at the Central European University.
Coffee Break with Researchers presents you with unique insights from the world of academia and higher education. In this series, we have conversations with team members of the Naturevation project, funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 program. Coffee Break with Researchers makes scientific knowledge accessible to all.
Dora, thank you very much for accepting this invitation to have a coffee break with me. How are you doing?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm doing quite well, and thanks for the opportunity for having the discussion.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I want to know, which coffee are you having? I'm having today a black coffee from Costa Rica.
Very nice. Actually, I am having a latte, but I don't know where it's coming from.
That's good to know. So this was only a quick show of our videos. And now I want to share with you the agenda of today, in which we'll have a talk with Professor Jan van der Borg from the University of Ca' Foscari in Venice, Italy. We'll have a short Q&A. Then we'll have the presentation of Jørgen Gies from Breda University of Applied Science, followed by the Q&A. And finally, we'll have talk from Professor Lydia Patrick from the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism. And finally, the closing remarks and summary. Our first speaker today is Professor Jan van der Borg. He, as I said before, is Professor of Economics and Tourism Policy. And after earning his master's in regional economics in 1986 and his doctorate in economics in 1991 from the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, he specialized in tourism economics and politics. He was a researcher in Venice and Rotterdam until 2002 and currently teaches tourism economics and management at the KU Leuven in Belgium. And he also directs the master degrees in tourism of both universities. He chairs the executive committee of the European Institute for Comparative Urban Research, and is a member of the advisory board of Visit Flanders. He has directed and directs numerous European research and training projects, and has been consultant to the Council of Europe, the European Commission, and to UNESCO. And he is advisor to the presidency of the Council of Ministers, the Veneto region, the province of Venice, and the city of Venice, mainly addressing issues related to development of sustainable tourism, the management of cultural and sporting mega events, and tourism type carrying capacity. Secondly, we have Jeroen Klies. He's professor of social impacts of tourism at the Breda University of Applied Science. He studied regional and urban economics at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And after his graduation, he worked for several years to the same university as researcher and lecturer. He studied his PhD about impacts of tourism at the same university and Wageningen University and Research. During his PhD, he worked in a broad range of research projects dealing with societal impacts of tourism. He was appointed as professor in 2019 on the topic of societal impacts of tourism. He has ambition to help actors, public, private NGOs, community actors, to contribute to the socioeconomic performance in the area of tourism. And finally, last but not least, of course, we have Professor Lydia Patrick from the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism. And either as project manager or as researchers, she participated in several scientific projects by the Croatian Ministry of Science, as well as the EU-funded projects. She participated as an expert in projects funded by the UNDP, GF, WWF, etc., and has been involved as a researcher and consultant, project manager in numerous development studies. And she's a member of the Croatian branch of the ERSE, the Scientific Committee for Tourism of the Croatian Academy of Sciences and Arts, and the Croatian Commission for UNESCO. Her main areas of interest are economic and development, effects of tourism, tourist destination management, planning, and cultural tourism management. Dr. Ante Mandik, I have him as a reporter. I'm going to introduce him quickly because he's not at the moment joining us as a panel, but he's there as an audience. He's assistant professor at the University of Split at the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism in Croatia. Myself, as I mentioned, head of communication of Coffee Break with Researchers. I also work as tourism marketing consultant as ATC Consultants, and finishing my PhD at the chair of international marketing at the University of Vienna. And my research focuses on emotions, country stereotypes, and country image. My master's is in brand management and at the University of Brunel in London, and professional advertising, specialized in management, branding, and communications. Also working in tourism-related projects, cultural heritage as an expert in EU-funded projects, regional and local tourism destination strategies, member of the European Marketing Association, and as I said, from the consultant perspective. So for the questions, please write them in the chat. We'll have a moderating session in the end, and we're just in time to start our first presentation.
Eccomi.
Sorry. So I give the word to you, Jan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lorena. Thank you also very much for Lydia for having me brought into this project, which is very challenging. I'm really sorry that we cannot meet each other face to face live in Split. Really one of the most beautiful cities of the world. I've seen a lot of cities as an urban economist, and so all these virtual tours are a surrogate for the real thing. So I really hope we have a very good and timely opportunity to meet each other again somewhere around Split, so that we can redo everything, but in a sort of a traditional way, because technology is fantastic, but there's nothing better than just a very good conference. Well, anyway, I am supposed to introduce this smart culture project that we are actually engaged in together, both Lydia and Jeroen. We are colleagues since really a lot of years, both with Lydia as well as with Jeroen. Jeroen was working at the University of Rotterdam in Urecour and at the department already when I think 20 or so years ago. And Lydia is working together with me in various projects, and we all share, I think, quite a lot of common interests, academic interests. I think that this quest for sustainable development, sustainable tourism development actually sort of connects us since quite a lot of years. So it was a very nice opportunity for us to get a network, a partnership together to manage and elaborate on this idea of sustainable cultural tourism in the context of Horizon 2020, in the context of this project that you will hear quite a lot about this afternoon. So thanks again for inviting, and let me just I have no presentation, just put the different issues that we actually want to face and to tackle in the right context. Now, one of the principal, I think, starting points for our whole discussion was the idea that cultural tourism is indeed a very important engine for social and economic development of all regions in Europe. Europe is a very rich area in the world with respect to the presence of cultural assets. We've been doing quite a lot of research for the European Commission already on this, and we found that indeed, especially on coastal areas, especially in urban areas, Europe is a very densely sort of populated region with respect to these assets, whether they're immaterial or material cultural assets. And we are all convinced within this network that this potential that actually cultural assets are offering to all different kinds of regions and areas in Europe with respect to social and cultural development, these assets are not always optimally used. So what we are actually sort of trying to figure out together is how regions and how Europe as a whole can use these cultural assets that it is possessing much better than it has been doing so far. Now, this brings us, of course, to the issue of the optimal use of cultural assets. As you know, as you might sort of understand quite easily, most of the cultural assets, both material and immaterial assets, are traditionally public goods or goods that actually belong to the humanity, as, for example, UNESCO likes to state it. And when a good is public, that almost automatically means that there's no sort of market price or market mechanism that actually sort of regulates the amount of users and also the price, the exchange price of the assets. And this, as you can understand quite easily, this always raises the question of how the market mechanism that is absent can be substituted by a mechanism that actually sort of, or a paradigm that actually guarantees the optimal use that is so often lacking in reality. Now, two families of non-optimal use are usually identified, and I think we are going to offer solutions, practical, concrete solutions in the Smart Culture project to both types of problems. The first is underutilization of cultural assets, cultural resources, and there's quite a lot of examples in Europe. Take the south of Italy, take along very many sort of art cities in Europe that are actually sort of not had not received any tourism, or most of the times tourism, before the COVID crisis struck. So there's this idea of underutilization, not using the opportunities as much as could be thought of. But there's also, that's the other family of non-optimal use, which is which was very relevant for the pre-COVID period, and it is an excessive use of cultural assets. And this excessive use of cultural assets actually of course, is responsible for a generation of a lot of economic benefits for a few stakeholders in the places that these assets actually possess. But it also raises question of social sustainability, of environmental and physical sustainability, and of maybe even in the end of health sustainability with respect to security and to health. In other words, what we are trying to achieve in this smart culture program and project is to see whether we can find, on the basis of our sort of analysis of situations of over and underutilization, if we can actually find a new business model for cultural tourism development in Europe. And I think that this the search for this new business model has not let's say, has not lost any of its importance because of the COVID crisis. I think, on the other hand, this COVID crisis, the fact that we now have to keep distances, have to be very careful about our health, about security, is actually emphasizing some of the shortcomings that this traditional cultural tourism development model had in the past, which is a replication of the sunset and scene mass tourism kind of business model, also for cultural attractions. So what we now actually want to do is to see whether we can find an alternative for this mass cultural tourism kind of development for European heritage and cultural destinations, to see whether we can pose some really fundamental questions with respect to the sustainability of this model from different kind of perspectives, and whether we can find also some policy suggestions and solutions for a new strategy with respect to the development of cultural assets, of heritage, and of natural kind of heritage within a European context. And that is actually the core of the smart culture project, as we have been defining it already sort of 1.5 years ago. To what I think, to my knowledge, I think this idea of evaluating the consequences of cultural tourism development in a smarter way, giving also the different stakeholders, entrepreneurs, the local population, policymakers, new tools to measure the impact of cultural tourism, rather than just looking at the sort of the economical aspects related to development, but also putting quality first rather than the quantity of people, and also refocusing the attention on local stakeholders is actually sort of, for me, the main recipe for a post-COVID cultural tourism kind of strategy. I would like to finish here, wait for some questions. I've seen that both Lydia and Jeroen have spectacular slides with respect to the program, so that they will go into detail much more than I did here in this like introductory speech. So I would, if there's any sort of question about the generalities, I'm really happy to answer these questions. But I would really like to give the floor to my colleagues and friends, Lydia and Jeroen, for the details with respect to the Smart Culture project. Thank you very much again for the invitation, and I hope it was clear what we actually intend to do in these coming years within this Horizon 2020 program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorena, for your introduction.
Great presentation, and a lot of questions, I think. I hope we still have some time before going to the next presentation. I don't know if there is a question already, not yet from the chat, but I do have a question for you.
That's fantastic.
How do you see, comparatively speaking, when you started the project, you said 1.5 years ago, and now, how do you see the aim or the relevance changing with regards to COVID? So imagine that you would have to start now again with the same project. would you change something, or would the relevance be different? How would you change it, or will it remain the same?
Yeah, no, I think, of course, COVID will have a lasting effect on the way that people are going to perceive and to enjoy their holidays. And it has also a lasting effect on how the tourism industry actually sort of perceives quality. The quality cannot be seen without attention for the health and the security aspects anymore. I think in the past, even if this pandemic will blow over, as I hope. What I see as a main risk is that the tourism industry, which has been hurt very, 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 very strongly, we are talking United WTO statistics tell us that it's about a minus 70% 2020 with respect to 2019 at the global level in terms of employment, in terms of profits, in terms of GDP generated. So I think there's a huge willingness of the tourism industry to get back to the pre-COVID kind of business model of quantity, of economies of scale, of also competition through the price. And I really think that that is a big mistake. I think we should use this opportunity that we now have to rebuild our tourism development paradigms from scratch. And this also very much regards cultural tourism development, and to see whether we can do things better, whether we can embrace a new kind of business model that actually sort of is both more sustainable, more conscious, more environmental and climate friendly, but also safer and also more healthy. And part of the over tourism narrative of the questions that we were raising before the start of the crisis on how to share public space, public facilities between inhabitants, local entrepreneurs and visitors, part of this narrative actually has been emphasized and even strengthened by what we have seen now during the COVID crisis. People are not queuing up anymore. People are not willing to get stuck in a completely loaded airplane or cruise ship. In other words, I think this COVID crisis might give us some extra tools to think about sustainable tourism development after the crisis has passed on. So if you're asking me, will this COVID crisis continue to give you new like suggestions, I would answer yes, certainly. I think also certainly we now have seen how can you say it, how sensitive this massive development model that often very much leads to touristic monoculture is to this kind of disruptive changes, whether it's a pandemic or something else. So for me, it's not like something that we have to reinvent in the sense that we have to take into account COVID explicitly, but I think it actually sort of has illustrated how weak this old paradigm, this old business model actually is with respect to these kind of terrible and disruptive kind of events.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So is there any question from my colleagues in the panel? If there's not, I will have only one more question, then we can go to your presentation. I wanted to ask you about your personal experience with the project. Is there anything you would like to share about something that you would like, that you like doing, something that nobody else can say? That's the coffee break question that everybody likes. The personal thoughts and the human motivation that you had behind joining the project, and this personal motivation too, personal experience.
Yeah, of course, as I said already in the beginning, it's very good to work with old friends or with friends that I've been working with since, in some cases like Jeroen's, decades. But it's also very good to meet new friends, new partners with which I've never worked before. that are all having the same motivations, enthusiasm about solutions, passion about the work. And it really is important in Europe, but also elsewhere, to continue to find these kind of partnerships, because working on islands, inventing the wheel 7,000 times is actually not efficient nor effective. So I think only by collaborating very closely together as academics all over Europe, we can, I think, also defeat, I'm quite optimistic about that, pandemics, but also a number of very troubling waves of terrorism that we have been experiencing also very recently, much better than I do. So I really hope that in this case, Europe is going to stand up also in the case of the COVID crisis and comes up with Europe-wide solutions, which are actually sort of sustained by the research that all our colleagues also in other projects are doing on a Europe-wide basis. That is my personal interest in this smart culture project. I'm really happy that we can work together with the people that we're working together with in this partnership for the coming years. It's very, very, very also enriching from a personal and from a sort of not only academic but from a personal kind of perspective. It's a very good question, by the way.
And I agree with you totally. Thank you very much again. And I will come back again to ask you more things in the end, because we'll have.
Of course, we now go to the other speakers, but there's a question and answer session also in the end. So if there's anything else that is requiring some kind of explanation, please.
Thank you. So I give the room now to you, Darren. Do you have presentation? By the way, I forgot to ask, are you guys having a coffee? Are you having any drink in between?
I was drinking some water, actually.
Some wine.
Wine.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's the Italian hour now for spirits.
Coffee is always welcomed.
Yeah.
Okay, let me take over. Thank you, Lorena, for the introductions. And let me first say that I share Jan's sentiment that it would be much better to actually been in Split and talk to you there. I've never been to Split, so I must just believe, Jan, that it's such a beautiful city. And I hope that within this project, I will still get the chance to go there and actually see that for myself. But let's assume just that it will be the case. Well, as Jan said, I have some slides I would like to show you to talk a bit more about the same Smart Culture project, but specifically on the work packages where we, as a Breda University of Applied Sciences, are mostly responsible for. And after me, Lydia will take over and she will focus on the work package that will follow after that. That's kind of the story we want to share with the three of us. Now, let me first try and get my screen up. If one of the other speakers could confirm that they are now seeing my screen.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, but it's now at the end of the presentation, so let me quickly go back to the beginning. That's more logical. Well, my name is Jeroen Kluijs. I'm working at Breda University, as was already mentioned at the beginning. I'm professor of social impacts of tourism. And that implies that within the professorship, we look at ways in which tourism can be organized in such a way that it contributes to the way areas, destinations are functioning, and in a social and economic, in many cases also in an environmental way. And we hope to help places via interventions, make places better to visit, but also especially also to live in and to work in. And the ambition within the professorship matches very well actually with the whole ambition of this Smart Culture project. Because here I have presented the main objective of the Smart Culture project. this links very well to what Jan was also saying. Dus we look into interventions intended to lead toward more sustainable cultural tourism. Jan also mentioned the richness of cultural assets in Europe, and we want to make sure that they are used in such a way that it contributes to the resilience and also inclusiveness of European rural regions and cities. Well, the concepts which Jan also mentioned in his presentation is that at the moment it is, at least in some places, it's unbalanced. You have the situation of over-tourism, or at least you used to have that before the whole COVID situation, and you have places of under-tourism where more usage could be made of this cultural assets and more could be done and better impacts could come from that. In light of this unbalanced situation, there might very well be very good opportunities for areas that are at the moment less visited, and they might offer, using their cultural tourism base and the assets they have, very authentic and experience-oriented forms of cultural tourism. And in that way, they could actually try to relieve some of the pressure on the over-visited destinations. So if after COVID we come back into a situation of potential tourism, this could be a way to kind of alleviate that burden. But of course, we do want to do this in such a way that when we start again and there is cultural tourism happening all over Europe, we don't come back in the pitfall of unsustainable development. And we want to do that by learning from the literature, but especially also from practices from all over Europe and even beyond. And that's why I'm going to talk mostly about Work Package 3. And what I'm showing you now is the schedule of the whole project. It starts at the top with theoretical development. So you cannot talk about cultural tourism without having properly defined that concept. What do we actually mean with that? What kind of tourism is cultural tourism and what is not? What is kind of tourism is not cultural tourism? Going from those definitions, we do several things. As I said, I will be talking about Work Package 3. Lydia will be focusing on Work Package 4. And all those things together. And also the last one, the platform, which I think Lydia will also be mentioning, will lead to input into so-called sustainable cultural tourism laboratories. Within our consortium, we have 6 places all over Europe where we want to apply the things we learn in Work Package 3, 4, and 5, and come up with real interventions with the real people there, and also try things out, and afterwards also evaluate with the people in these living labs, and people I refer to companies, to policymakers, to tourists, to inhabitants, how these interventions worked out, and what lessons we can get from that, not just for the places themselves, but also, of course, for a broader context. Well, going from this whole structure of the project, now the focus on Work Package 3. So the idea from Work Package 3 is that we want to learn from what is already there. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We also want to see what has already happened in terms of cultural tourism, what kind of policies have been tried all over Europe, what worked, what didn't work, what were the success conditions. And that will provide us a lot of inspiration and also maybe good ideas about what not to do when working in our living labs and what to do ultimately in terms of recommendations. Well, here you have the schedule. As you see, the Breda University of Applied Sciences is in the lead of that work package, but we're certainly not the only one, because actually all partners in the project helped us to gather these interventions from all regions in Europe. We've created a sort of an internal form in which they could note down any kind of intervention they would find interesting, write down details about the way that worked out, the success conditions, the impact, the process behind it. Now, I will show you later, we now have a very big list of potential interesting interventions with already a lot of information behind it. Well, I will explain later that in the next phase, we're going to go even one step deeper. But first, this is the goal of Work Package 3. So we're going to look into best practices and see what were the impacts of the interventions that were tried there and what were the success conditions. And maybe, because I've used the word intervention now a lot, and actually one of the steps also in work package 2 was first to define what do we actually mean with an intervention. Well, here's the definition. So cultural tourism intervention is a purposeful action planned and conducted by a broad range of actors. So it can be by the local government, but also an NGO, a private organization, or any collaboration between them, where they do something to try and influence the social, cultural, environmental, economic performance of an area where cultural tourism takes place. Now, what can this be, for example? It can be about investments in the physical space. It can be about marketing. It can be about rules and regulation. It can be about using technology to point people towards certain unknown attractions. It can be about new governance structures. So there is really a broad range of possible interventions, things you could do in a place to make sure that in the end, cultural tourism has the effects you would be hoping for. But given that this is such a broad range, one of the first steps you want to do is create a taxonomy. So what kind of characteristics of interventions can you identify? And based on that, what kind of examples can we find from all the regions in Europe? Well, now that we have this list of best practices, and the next step is to do this. Maybe it's also good to just nuance a bit the word best practice, or actually the combination best practice. Because with best practice, we don't mean that an intervention is necessarily perfect. Of course not. Even an intervention that has in the perception of some actors a great result might very well be, in the eyes of another actor, a little bit less successful. That's the context you're dealing with. The urban situation is complex. A lot of actors there with different interests, different perceptions. And also, it's also interesting in a way to look at an intervention, not only if it's perfect, but also to identify what did not go so well. 100 so-called best practices. They are not all perfect cases. We also want to learn from those cases what can be improved. Well, once we've done that, once we have the best practices and we have analyzed deeper some of them in the form of case studies, we want to create, in the end of this work package, a framework of interventions showing all possibilities, impacts, what kind of impacts can you expect from a certain intervention, and success conditions. So in what situation will an intervention be successful or not? Like I said, we used a form, an internal form, to collect from all our partners throughout in the project throughout Europe to collect information. And they don't only did this for their own country, but they did this for a range of countries so that we have all regions in Europe covered in that respect. Each form, we focused on one intervention. About general information, especially we asked about the intervention, its objectives, its impacts as objectively measured or perceived or expected. And we asked about all kinds of additional information about this intervention. So where can we find that information? Well, like I said, we want to have a good coverage, so all European Union countries, but also coverage in terms of types of intervention, and I just gave some examples, and types of destinations. The list now contains over 102 interventions, and that might sound a lot, but of course, in Europe, you could even have maybe 100,000 interventions. So of course, it was also up to our partners to try to find the most innovative, most interesting examples. Well, we're busy now analyzing this whole list, so that the results I will now present are just a starter. We will go much deeper into them. But I just wanted to give some examples of the kind of interventions we have in our list now, and from which we will choose in the end also our case studies. Well, first, there is a group of interventions which are really about the content of cultural tourism. So it's about ways to add to this content or to make this content better known. For example, via routes or via apps or via walks, or bringing it into education or organizing events around it. And that's one group. The second group is much more based on governance, you could say. It's about making plans on what to do with cultural tourism. It's about involving the local community. It's about how to cooperate in a good way and even learn people how to cooperate. Next one is about money. It's about using the funds available at the government to support your cultural tourism institutions. Also support for minority heritage projects, especially relevant, for example, for our Finnish partners up in the north, where they have a region where this is a very relevant topic to provide support for the people there. It's also about these kind of things. Can you come up with guidelines which tourists can follow when they visit the place? And how do you get to actually do what you tell them to do? Maybe that's via labels, certificates, where you explain to them that they are engaged in a good cultural tourism experience, an experience that is not just fun for them, but also we also have interventions which are focused on spreading people around. So, for example, from the high season to the low season, or about capacity management, for example, asking an entrance fee, or about using all kinds of smart tools to manage visitor flows. And finally, some little bit more focused interventions. So the sustainable tourism attractions, really focusing on the attraction level and how do you help the entrepreneurs involved make their own attraction more sustainable from an environmental, mostly point of view, but also with attention for economic aspects. And finally, about eating healthy food, also locally sourced, but also an interesting way to contribute to the development. Well, just an idea about what will be going on in these interventions. Like I said, the next step is case studies, because having a list of 102 interventions is nice, but to provide really good lessons about what you can, how you should intervene in cultural tourism, you have to go one step deeper. And we will do that. From the 100 interventions, we will select 25 interventions for case studies. So we will go really in depth about what happened there, what were the impacts, how did people perceive that, what was the governance aspects of it, and really to find out why it worked in a certain place, and if you can also transfer this intervention to other places struggling maybe with the same problems. Of course, the whole analysis will be based on the overall starting point of the project, namely sustainable development and an aim towards resilience. I also wanted to mention that we will also focus specifically on some interventions where European money is being used, because we also want to find out, and that's of course also in the interest of the people that are giving us the money, the European institutions, if this money will lead to good interventions that help put these regions forward. And the method we will use for the case studies is desk research, but we will also do interviews, because you can imagine that not all information we want to have, we really want to go in depth, is already available on paper. So interviews are then the way to use to go behind the paper and find out how people are really perceiving those interventions, the impacts and success conditions. Well, with that, I want to end my presentation and give the room for questions. But it's good that after me, Lydia will follow up, because the different work packages within this project are closely connected. So the story about indicators and later on also the platform, it's good to have that as one whole and see what we will produce. For now, I will stop. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that with that I can give the word back to Lorena.
Thank you very much for the nice presentation. We have indeed questions for you and also for Jan, so we will take some time first with you, and then maybe Jan can also remember for the panel later. The first question is, how do you see the ability of destinations to fight against over-tourism?
Yeah. Shall I do that, or do you want to, Jan?
No, you do it, because I have a separate question which is related to that. So
yeah, the fight against over-tourism. Well, I mentioned one thing in my presentation. One thing I mentioned that often in a place with over-tourism, you would have other places close by, maybe in the vicinity, in the rural regions surrounding that place, where there is still some potential for cultural tourism development or other kinds of tourism. It might be a very good idea to see if you can somehow interest people also to go to these other places outside the urban core, where it's often very busy. So spreading people around. But I'm not going to say that that is the only possibility and it will work in all situations. Because of course you will always have tourists that are just interested in going to a hot, and they might be very, very difficult to move around. But one thing that is important to know, and of course I'm from the Netherlands, and in Amsterdam there was, of course, before the corona, a big discussion about over-tourism. Everybody was complaining about that. But if you really look at the numbers, you'll see that, okay, international tourists are a big part of the visitors in Amsterdam, and they are often seen as the big cause of over-tourism. But if you really look at the numbers, there are also a lot of people just from the Netherlands on day trips, people visiting for all kinds of other reasons, and also a lot of people that don't come for Amsterdam for the first time, but have been there already several times. Well, if you talk about spreading people to other places, for example, other interesting cultural tourism facilities, those people, the inhabitants of the Netherlands, people that have already been there, it might be much more easier to spread those people around instead of these first-time visitors that want to see the hotspots. So this instrument of spreading people around will have to be used careful and aimed at the right type of tourist. And also, spreading people around, as you saw in my overview of the intervention, is just one type of intervention. There are many. In that sense, what we hope to uncover within this project is a range of possibilities to deal with both the problems of over-tourism, but also, as I mentioned, and as Jan also mentioned, under-tourism. So I hope that is a sufficient answer to the question for now.
Yeah, I imagine that. I think you both share that notion, understanding what tourism wants and needs, but also understanding what local stakeholders want and need is important to keep that balance. Dan, would you like to add something to the answer?
No, I think it's a perfect answer to this over-tourism thing. What I've been learning already since I think 20 years now in Venice is that much of the innovation that actually takes place in tourism is either demand-led. It's coming from the tourists that actually want more authenticity, more uniqueness, and therefore ask a local tourism industry, a destination, to change their attitudes with respect to visitors, not treating them as numbers anymore, but a sort of a very personal kind of treatment, doing stuff with the locals. And then indeed, this is the second, I think, very important stakeholder that is going to make some change possible, and that is the local itself. In Venice, the strongest movements against over-tourism, but it's the same in Berlin and in Barcelona and in Bruges, are the local, the inhabitants, the local population. And often this actually means that from like an academic kind of issue, over-tourism becomes a political issue. It's local politicians that have to take into account that their voters might be fed up with situations that are not acceptable anymore. And then I see some change with respect to non-optimal use of cultural tourism assets. In a turbulent world, which is the other question that was posed to me, I think that the quest for novelties, for new things, is even bigger. So for me, this COVID crisis, unfortunately, is something that helps us maybe to make the statement even better than before. I'm also quite a big fan of Schumpeter's business cycles theory that says that in a disruptive change kind of moment, the weaker parts of a system will suffer more than the stronger parts, which in the end leads to some kind of extinction of marginal and non-quality kind of activities, which makes the system as a whole more competitive and stronger just after the crisis. So I'm quite optimistic that indeed destination will become more resilient towards forms of over-tourism and under-tourism after the COVID crisis, which is, I think, a very good thing. But of course, everything is to be seen when reality hits us again after the vaccine will be widespread and or the virus has automatically disappeared from our lives. So it's still a question mark as far as I'm concerned, but I'm quite optimistic anyway.
Actually, I really liked, I think, an argument you said about put quality first, focusing on quality versus quantity. I think that's a key insight of you both what you both said, that in the key for resilience, not only for developing countries but also for developed countries, is actually focusing on the quality of the tourism products that they want to develop, because it cannot be anymore about mass tourism. So they have to really be more competitive in order to survive. So it's a great insight. Thank you, Jan. There is one question before going to Lydia's presentation. This is more academic into more the methodology of data collection that you are, I guess, based on what you presented. What is the main problem concerning the data collection related to sustainability indicators? I guess, Jeroen, since you mentioned more, would you like to say something? Would you like to answer that question?
To be quite honest, I think it would actually be better to answer this question after Lydia's presentation, because the presentation will be a lot about indicators and the challenges in the project. So maybe it's good to postpone that until Lydia has given her presentation.
I think it's one of the members of Lydia's. Lydia, I think it's one of your members that actually asks this question to get some heads up from the public and from us.
It seems to me, yes, that he's translating the questions because of some technical issues. I don't know whether they will be able to resolve them, but for the moment he is getting some questions and forwarding them towards us. Okay, so if I can begin with my presentation. Lorena, thank you. Yes, okay. So I would like to say hello to all of you, my dear colleagues, Lorena, yourself, and of course, all the participants of this session. It is my great honor and pleasure to be here, partially as a host because I'm the member of the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism, and of course, as a person who is deeply involved with the project that we are discussing nowadays, together with a team of mine. There are 9 of us in the team, and we are very proud and thankful to Jan and all the colleagues that we are cooperating with. So I will now try to share my presentation. So please give me a minute. Oh, yeah, okay. I hope that it will go okay.
Yes, we can see it, Lydia.
Okay, great. Fantastic. And I will now, okay, so, okay, I have introduced myself and Lorena has done the same, and I can start with presenting the project and the work package that we are as a team working on. So here is the screenshot of the main page of the project with the picture of the city of Split behind it. I'm really deeply sorry that you were not able to be here. As Jan said, especially for us, the locals, this is the biggest, the most beautiful city in the world. But everyone else is very satisfied when they get here. However, as you can see, Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism is one of 9 members of the consortium of partners who are involved with the project. And you see here the names of all the participants from up on the north of Europe, Lapland University, down to Siham from Zaragoza in Spain. Then UNESCO is also partner, Model University, Breda, Ca' Foscari University, Leuven University, and of course Quantitas as the firm working firmly with the University of Ca' Foscari. So we as a team, Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism, is involved with the work package 4, which is titled, as you can see, Assessing the Impacts of Cultural Tourism. So the very title of this work package reflects actually the basic idea that we have been dealing with. And this is actually the idea of getting more information about some important frameworks of indicators. Namely, the main 2 main objectives of this work package are presented here. The first one actually refers to extending knowledge on different kind of indicators related to cultural tourism development, to destinations sustainability, destinations resilience, and also we are trying to find the relationship between cultural tourism development and its impacts on tourism, destination sustainability and resilience. All this together we put within the context of the tourism area life cycle model. So the basic information about these indicators have been already given in the deliverable in the report that has been uploaded recently on the project's website that you can easily find and on the web pages of the Faculty of Economics, and I have also put it here in my presentation at the first slide. In our second objective, we are about to deliver a sustainability resilience talc framework of indicators, and we will try to apply this framework in each of the living labs that we are dealing with. As Göran has said, there are 6 living labs. So we are about to take into account contextual factors reflecting the state of the art of the particular living labs. So talking about tourism destination sustainability and resilience is a very, very demanding task. At the beginning of the project, we knew that it would be very hard, but we, believe me, didn't know that it would be that hard. Why is that so? Because both these concepts, as well as other concepts that we are referring to in this project, are very heterogeneous and very, actually, very complex ones. So the quest for the most suitable for the best kind of indicators measuring either sustainability and resilience is an ongoing challenge. We know that the quest for or the story of sustainability is not a novel one. Ever since 1987 and the Brundtland's report, this concept has been widely used not only in tourism-related literature, but also generally speaking, with regard to development in general. But in recent years, as Jan and Göran have already stressed, that the problems of over-tourism that many of the European cities, especially the historical cities such as Barcelona, Venice, and Dubrovnik, here in Croatia, have been facing with. This need to clarify the concept even more deeper and to continue with the quest for the suitable indicators to measure sustainability have become or have come even more into the focus of interest of researchers. I have found here a very nice sentence by Higgins Despiolis, who said that due to these over-tourism problems, citizens of the cities that have been endangered, that are actually endangered by over tourism have started to ask tourism to be reclaimed from an industry that has defined it solely as a business sector for the profit accumulation to a human endeavor based on the rights and interests of local communities in welcoming tourists. So unfortunately, in this struggle for to survive, actually, we have forgotten that tourism is not just the industry, not only the business, but also something that is deeply embedded into everyday's life of the local community. So for the last few decades, a number of literature and researchers has stressed out different kind of frameworks that could be used to analyze and monitor sustainability of tourism development. However, most of these indicator frameworks have failed to depict the sustainability of tourism development at the local level. Also, most of the frameworks have been dealing with sustainability through three tiers or three pillars, that is economic, environmental, and social cultural one. While in our research, we have tried to actually split social and cultural into two different tiers due to the focus of interest of this particular project that we are dealing with. So our quest for the best or for the most suitable sustainability indicators have started with a systematic literature review done through actually the VOS and the Scopus databases. The initial sustainability indicator lists have generated more than 500 different indicators. Then we obviously had to shorten the list, and we have done the first or the preliminary pre-selection of these indicators by the members of the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism team. So after these preliminary phases, we have got 75 indicators retained. Then we've got into the third phase of this. We used the help of our colleagues and friends, partners, the panel of experts consisting of Smart Culture members. And we have used the MCDM score-based weighting method, and after that, AHP weighting method with Satiscale to deliver the final list. So our final list of sustainability indicators has some 46 actually, both quantitative and qualitative indicators. Some of them are of course, site-specific, especially those that are related to the resident opinions or the tourist opinions as well. Of course, you can imagine what problems we have had and we still have actually with collecting such data, considering that there is no tourists at the moment. But since we are also dealing with smart indicators, we are using the help of CAFOS, Korean Quantitas partners to scrap many of the data regarding perception of the tourists related to the tourism offer. In our next task, we had to deliver the list of cultural tourism development indicators. In this case, we haven't done such a process of several steps because both cultural and tourism development indicators are actually already obtainable by a number of by few papers, few works done by UNESCO and EC and UNWTO. Actually, we have decided to use the as the sources of indicators cultural sustainability agenda 2030 ETIS and UNWTO's document related to tourism governance indicators. This list has also a variety of qualitative and quantitative indicators. Of course, not all of them can be used for the further steps, but those that are to be used will depend on on either their availability, but also on the type and characteristics of a destination, and the analysis that is the living lab as a destination. As we have mentioned, we are dealing with the living labs. So in the next step, or the third task that we had to deal with is related to the tourism destinations resilience indicators. We know that resilience have been employed in various contexts, different time periods, and numerous locations and scales. We know that there are also different kind of definitions of resilience. I have chosen here the evolutionary kind of an approach, which understands resilience as the ability of a region to adapt over the short run following a disturbance, or to develop new growth paths over the long run. So in our quest for the most suitable resilience indicators, we have performed 4-stage process. In the first stage, we had to define what the geographical area is that we are going to look for the resilience indicators. We have defined, of course, the territory of the 6 labs, but the problem is that all these living labs do not cover the same kind of geographical area, they do not have the same geographical scope, and some of them are not administratively defined, which may cause the problem with collecting data. That is why we have decided that the lowest unit to deal with the data is the LAU, or the local administrative unit, which is the part of the living lab. There are several administrative units within each one of the labs. In the second stage, we have defined the kind of a shock that we are dealing with, as resilience is always dealing with some global shocks or the local ones. In this case, considering that we can't take into account this latest global disaster named COVID-19, the only possibility to deal with is the 2008 global economic and financial crisis, because for the purpose of dealing with resilience indicators, we have to deal with the longer time series data. In the third phase, we have defined some indicators to measure resilience for the purpose of getting the final resilience index at the end. And in the fourth stage, we are dealing with some, let's say, control variables or indicators that may affect the issue of resilience, besides those that are originally chosen to measure resilience itself. In the fourth stage of our report and our quest is actually the concept of tourism area life cycle. As you can see, all of these concepts are very complex ones. So we are also developing kind of a model for, let's say, assessing to what life stage a certain destination, certain living lab belongs to. And at the end, in the second deliverable, we hope that this information will be useful when we create final sustainability resilience talc framework of indicators, which will be verified at each one of the living labs that we are dealing with. So a lot of work still awaits us. All these data that we are collecting will not serve only to the work package 4 and the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism team, but will also be very useful to all the other colleagues, especially to the colleagues who are working on the work package 5, that is Ca' Foscari University and Quantitas. They will actually, based on these data, as well as some other data, including data scrapped from the internet, they will create the dashboard, which will be fed up by different levels and different kinds of indicators that may serve later as the basis for making up decisions. This is a kind of a decision support system. So we hope that all these deliverables will create one, let's say, nice story and nice project, and that all these ideas that we are dealing with in different work packages will at the end create a very nice outputs coming out of this project. So for the moment, this would be all. I'm open for the questions. Of course, I'm not the only one who worked at this, so you will understand my inability to answer very precisely, but I will try to do my best. And I'm, of course, very thankful to the team that I'm working with for all the help and all the efforts that we are dealing with in this work package. Thank you.
Lydia, thank you very much for this nice presentation. And I guess now we understand why you are the perfect one to answer our latest questions. So please, in your opinion, what is the main problem concerning the data collection related to sustainability indicators?
Yeah. Okay, so as I have said, this struggle for indicators is very, very hard one. Actually, before I answer the question, I must say one thing. I always quote this to my students as well when we are discussing the concept of management, destination management in particular. And it seems very suitable for all such situations. Namely, I recall the Lewis Carroll's Alice in the Wonderland, and there is that magnificent sentence at the beginning which says that if you do not know where you are going, every road is good enough or bad enough, we can say. So if you do not have proper information, proper indicators that are related to the issues that you are dealing with, you actually can't get a proper decision. So to get all these proper decisions within the framework of managing either an enterprise or a destination, which is a more complex system, I should say that we need a whole variety of indicators, both quantitative and qualitative ones. But unfortunately, not all of the data are available. So as I have stressed, there are numerous frameworks of indicators. Some of them have been used by us, some of them by different authors. But data for all of these indicators are simply either non-existent, or if they do exist, it is almost impossible to get longer time series of data. So for any more serious kind of a task, you can't get proper information. So another problem might be also a problem of finances, I should say. How is that so? For example, some data are payable, actually. You have to pay for them. So unless you don't get rich donators or you are not funded by some EU programs, it is very hard for any DMO manager or any researcher who is doing some individual research to get actually these very often very costly data. Also, we have the situation that some data might be available, but they come from different sources. So in case when you have, for example, data from one source, it is usually for one period of time, and the other source offers the same data for the next period of time. So you are actually, again, in the problem. You can't make the time series for that indicator because you have maybe two different approaches regarding the issue of collecting data. So these are, I think, more or less the most important issues or problems that we are facing in all of our researches. Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't. Okay.
Sorry?
Now yeah, I can see you now.
Sorry, yeah. I made a mistake. I had put the mic off. Apologies. I was just saying that as in any effort to do measurement theory, you aim to develop a reliable tool that is valid in different settings. And I find that the topic of sustainability is particularly complicated since you deal with different countries, different settings, and in each one you face completely different resources and different scenarios. How do you see this developing of indicators for using in different destinations? How do you see this multi-purpose or applicability of these indicators of sustainability?
Also, yes, this is a very good question. As a matter of fact, we must be aware that there is no one fits for all model. That means that no matter how thorough research we have been doing, no matter how many indicators we are using, there will never be the same set or framework of indicators that may fit to each particular case. This is why in this report, we are actually dealing with the wider number of indicators that may be offered the same as INETIS, for example, or some other frameworks. But we must actually offer an opportunity for those who will need such information to pick up those indicators that are the most suitable for their kind of destination. However, we must keep in mind that there are some general type of indicators that may be useful for everyone. For example, tourism destination is usually either a city or a region or any other, both administrative or non-administrative unit, territorial unit. So for that purpose, you usually use the core indicators that may measure sustainability of any other kind of a human activity within that territory. So these are kind of core indicators. For example, those related to, I don't know, CO2 emissions or quantity of waste produced per capita and so forth. However, when you get to the very type of a destination, some destinations are actually dealing with cultural tourism, some are dealing with some other kind of tourism. So this orientation, this tourism market niche that they are oriented to, also imposes that that they have to use some site-specific indicators, both quantitative and qualitative ones. So, for example, you will not measure some or indicators related to, I don't know, cruise ship passengers and traffic, such as in Venice or in Split or in Dubrovnik. When you in the continental cities, which do not have cruisers and such problems. So we always come from the fact that there is a core set of indicators, but many of them are site-specific and not the same framework may fit to all kind of destinations.
Thank you, Lydia, for that. Is there any question from the panel, from participants, Lydia?
Unfortunately, I do not see any. It seems that we are probably still in a problem. I've been present in the last session, so there were also some problems. Unfortunately, I don't know. I see no other comments.
I do have a question for you. Thinking about policy making and hopefully a lot of policymakers are seeing your talk. What kind of recommendation or what kind of implications do you see based on the challenges that you have presented when developing these indicators for sustainability? So what can you imagine that either policymakers face or can improve or can do to make this better?
Yeah, this is also a very nice question, Lorena. Thank you. I think that coming from the Croatian situation, which I know the best actually, we are very often facing the problem of getting proper information, proper data for our researchers. both theoretical and the empirical ones. The situation somehow gets a little bit better after the entrance of Croatia into the EU, because we have the access to more sources, and even our statistics is becoming much better. When you get to the tourism-related indicators, there are also some things that are changing. For example, Croatian Institute for Tourism from Zagreb has created the so-called CROSTO system, or Croatian Observatory for Sustainable Tourism Indicators, which is leaning on ETIS set of indicators, which means that things have been slightly going on for the better. However, all those that are in charge of collecting indicators or data for the indicators have to keep in mind what I have said at the beginning in my first answer to your question, that we have to deal with proper, transparent, and accessible data if we want to get any policy measure which is grounded, let's say, on the facts. Otherwise, we are in the dark wood. We may get decisions, but with no proper basement for any of the decisions. So I need this, that data collection is something that will probably gain much more attention in the following years, because at the moment, as I have explained, it is my personal feeling, but also many of the colleagues that I'm working with, that we are still tapping in the darkness.
Thank you, Lydia. It's really relevant, your project at the moment. I'm very happy to get to know it in this phase and looking forward to more results. And now I give the free room to our panel discussion. Slobodan, if you could just maybe open the 4 squares so we are equal, but never mind, it doesn't matter. Is there any question you would like to discuss in the panel?
No, I don't have any question. I don't receive any question from
maybe
you.
just a remark from my side on what you have been asking Lydia, and you've been asking me and Jeroen. I think it all starts from the business model, actually, because in the classical business model of mass tourism applied to cultural tourism, just having some information about the overnight stays and the arrivals, plus the money spent by people, as the United Nations, WTO, is actually sort of collecting for many countries, was more than enough to fund your policies on. In a business model that is more complex, more comprehensive, more inclusive, more oriented towards quality, and of the impacts of actually your tourism development strategies. Obviously, the indicators that actually Lydia was mentioning, even if we are not arriving in the end to achieve a measurement of 45 indicators in the end, I think is already a very big step forward towards a new way of using cultural assets in Europe. So I'm quite optimistic that even if we might not really achieve all the academic kind of objectives we've been posing as a network, a partnership, in any case, the contribution that this project is actually going to make to sustainable and healthy cultural tourism is a very positive and innovative one. So again, thanks to Jeroen and to and to Lydia, to other parties in the network, I think we are moving into the right direction.
I think so too. I think it's a great idea, and I share the heads from researcher, but also practitioner working with communities in development of tourism strategies, particularly in developing countries in the Middle East and South America. And I can say that it's really hard to implement sustainable tourism development strategies, also because people really are not used to these concepts. They're not used to understanding this whole framework that surrounds these notions. So if we from the academia have those notions clear and we have this implementation clear as a roadmap, then consultants and practitioners can have it in a way more straightforward way to teach them to local communities, or to get this stakeholder engagement that you were talking about in the beginning, which I also think is a key insight from your talk, Jan, that is not only about having it clear from a tourism side, but also going there to the local community, see what they need, what they can do to improve their tourism products, and not only getting all the money from one tourist. That is in some cases what happens and is completely what creates this mass tourism, but it's going into the balance mode, is like how we can get this awareness of a more conscious and sustainable tourism. So that's a great insight. Jerome, would you like to add something to that question from before about perhaps policy making, or about the project application?
Yeah, what I was thinking about is also again in the Netherlands, where we are very used to having so-called destination marketing organizations, DMOs. We have a national DMO called the MBTC, but we also have DMOs on all the regional levels. But gradually, they've started to change the meaning of the M. It used to be always management, attracting visitors to the Netherlands, attracting visitors to the Netherlands. Now the M has become management. And they are now much more aware of the need not to attract as many people as possible, but to attract the right people and to attract them to the right places. With that awareness also comes the fact that they are now asking us, the knowledge institutions, much more information about the tourists, about who they are, what their demands are, but also what their impacts are. So I can really see from the practical point of view, more questions coming that are going in the right direction, going from marketing and numbers towards attention for quality. So I think in that sense, the development that was starting before the COVID situation, my hope is maybe silently that the COVID situation will strengthen that and put even more emphasis on the management aspect instead of only the marketing aspect.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for that. I think this is a great point also that you mentioned, finding the right balance between getting the inputs from academia, right, but also to get them and to transfer them to local communities. That's a real challenge, and taking also what Lydia said, is that the importance of developing right indicators to measure the right thing everywhere is something that really takes time to think, and sometimes people don't realize the challenge and the importance of this. So I'm really, really happy to have had this discussion with you all. It is an amazing project, and I really wish you all the best for the outcomes. We will now coming to the end of our session. Unfortunately, we didn't have so many questions. Apparently, we had a problem with our chat, but nevertheless, I think we had a great discussion. The insights were very clear. I think I have several notes here, so I cannot say them all right now, but for me, I will highlight two, which is about finding this balance about what tourists want and need, and what the local stakeholders want and need to develop this focus on quality tourism for resilience in these difficult times. And also from the theoretical part, getting the indicators right for such a complex issue as sustainability in tourism, that is really important, not only for our theories and our frameworks, but also for the development of tourism strategies. So I don't know if you want to add something else as highlight of the discussion.
I think you've said it all for me, actually.
Yeah, for me
Thank you very
too.
much
Yes.
for your synthesis. Thank you, Jeroen and Lydia, for having this opportunity to get some things out of the project. So,
and of course, from my side as well. Thank you, Lorena. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I would like to take a picture of you all. So
yeah,
okay. Share it on our social media if that's okay. So I wanted to have the picture of all of us together. That was a bit difficult. So I didn't want to be the one with the bigger face, but okay. So please smile. I'm fine. It's fine. Lydia, you were the big one.
You should be the one at the top.
No, believe me, Lydia, I'm too much videos. I don't like that so much anymore. It's been a pleasure to meet you all and hope to see you again in a coffee break.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, guys. Good luck and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.